And a lot of the studies, just so you know, came up around 9/11 because 9/11, woof, I mean, listen, that's all you saw for like a month or two. A couple months was stories on 9/11, so you get fatigued with it. So this is just one of the things and one of the ways that people find themselves stressed out in these situations.
And I think, when you get into the stress piece, that this is something that all of us can relate to in our personal lives, professional lives. So I know Dr. McDuffy was just giving some recommendations on how to deal with that stress. Dr. McDuffy, could you talk about some more recommendations, more things that people could do to really, get rid of some of that chronic stress, get rid of some of that temporary stress?
Absolutely. Nature heals. So and what that means is, and this is in the research as well, there's research that shows that nature in of itself, it has a healing property. So when you're walking in the park, when you're especially walking by water, you're listening to birds, you're hearing squirrels in the trees, all these things, feeling the breeze on your face, all these things heal. So if you're stressed, if you're anxious, spend some time in nature. And what that can look like for you is go to your local park, go for a walk in your park, sit by any source of water, a pond, a lake, a river, whatever you have in your area. If you live in an urban jungle per se, where it's just a country jungle where you really don't have a lot of nature, then sit by a tree, feel the wind blowing your face off of your balcony or your deck. Whatever nature you have, even if it's just a little bit of nature, expose yourself. And I know it's funny, for years as a kid, I remember seeing movies, and I know you can testify this, where the family goes out into the middle of nowhere, into a cabin, in the middle of the woods, and I'm like, well, why would they do that? That wasn't my thing. I don't want to go to no cabin in the woods, get bit by mosquitoes.
Sure. And I think that nature is a big piece of healing and calming. And I know, we're going to talk about spiritual medication as well. I think the nature and the calming and the spiritual medication kind of go hand in hand, whether if you have a spiritual conscience or a spiritual background, or if you don't. People that do have that spiritual conscience, they often talk about how God puts himself in nature. Whether if you choose to believe it or not, I think we all get a calming effect, a calming, relaxing effect, whether if it's at the beach, on the water, sitting in a cabin. So again, there's many clinical studies done on the calming effects of nature. So I think that's really a good one for all of us at some point. But the key is knowing yourself, knowing your body. When you become stressed, when you become anxious, when you become angry, nervous, knowing your body, knowing who you are. Just myself, I feel like more and more each year I'm learning different things about when it's time for me to take some time off of work, when it's time for me to get away from it all. So again, that's a big piece of this as well, just knowing, listening to your body and knowing who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you brought up spirituality, we may as well go to that. So when we say spirituality, we're talking about what that looks for you. So listen, we're from a Christian background, and one of the things that I knew growing up and know is that prayer and letting those worries go to God was a big thing, a big coping skill, right? You're worried about something, you pray about it, and then you're going to go to God, and you believe that it's going to happen, and it happens, right? But whatever that looks for you, if you're Muslim, if you're Buddhist, if you're just spiritual, but you don't really relate to one religion, whatever that looks like for you, spirituality is a coping mechanism. So when you look at it like that, depend on that coping mechanism during tough times. And this is one of those tough times, COVID-19, for the racial unrest, and even the political season. And as well, which led to a financial crisis, which I, totally missed in the opening. So spirituality is a biggie. And with that spirituality, sometimes we can talk about meditation, and obviously there's mindfulness, right? Which is a more secular brand of meditation per se. And depending on how you meditate, because really technically prayer is meditation, right? But there's all types of mindfulness you can do, and it doesn't have to be the same. So that's the thing. If you go and you know somebody who did mindfulness and you didn't like it, consider this. There's walking mindfulness, there's sitting mindfulness, there's laying mindfulness. It's not all the same. And if you do mindfulness one place and you don't like it, you might like it with somebody else.
And I always recommend, again, just having done therapy for a number of years, I always recommend when it comes to any kind of mindfulness or muscle relaxation, personalize it, make it specific to you and your likes. I always recommend go on Google, say if you're really interested in sports, type in sports mindfulness activities, see what applies to you, because that's generally when we stick to these things of mindfulness and relaxation, which clinically have been proven to be some of the top things that reduce that stress. Me, I love sports, I love my athletics. So I'll do things that the athletes do. Deep breathing really works good for me. So when you get into this deep breathing, but it was a big joke to me in my 20s or even as a teenager. But then I see a video on Bruce Lee talking about, deep breathing and mind control. You can strengthen the muscles, you can relax the muscles. Well, that's when it kind of hit home for me. Some of the deep breathing and some of the mindfulness activities, again, when you personalize it and it's something that you're interested in, it makes it a lot easier for you to buy into it, stay consistent, and really just exercise it, when you're everyday living.
Absolutely. And to talk a little bit more about the mindfulness piece of it, the body scans where you focus on specific body parts, or you just scan from head to toe of your body in a slow and methodical way. There's focusing on your breath, and then you can even focus on one body part. Like if your arm hurts and you want to just breathe into your arm, you can do that. You can also focus on the things around you, which is one of my particular favorites. And I've done this and just walked around my neighborhood and taking a couple breaths and then started breathing normally, but just listen for how many sounds you can hear. You can listen for birds. Sometimes you'll hear cars passing by, you'll hear people, you hear all types of things. And then just making an account, a mental note of what things you heard. The thing about mindfulness is it's not really a perfectionist activity. If you're a perfectionist, it's good for you because you can practice not being a perfectionist. There's no wrong way to do it. If you lose focus, so be it, you just refocus. So it's a really good activity. It strengthens the brain and it calms the body. And in its simplest form, it's just paying attention on purpose. So, and the one last part is visualization. Visualization is another thing that athletes use as well, since in terms of just visualizing and meditating, but visualizing the victory, visualizing what you're going to do, right? You can use it for if you have a project at work, visualizing how you're going to present that project while meditating. It's a good tool.